It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation.
Welcome to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we are delighted that you've chosen to join us once again. Want to remind everybody about the app.
Oh, please download the app. Take a moment and do that. If you're watching on the app, God bless you. If you're watching elsewhere, go to gilberthouse.org/app or unravelingrevelation.tv/app and bring that into your smartphone or tablet. We've also got Roku and Apple TV versions as well. And the reason for this is that the company that maintains the app and hosts all of the content on it, which is everything we do, this program, our podcast, our Bible study
stuff.
It's all hosted by a Christian company, so we won't be canceled from our own app. So take a moment and do that, and God bless you for taking the time to do it.
And don't forget that there is a conversation area within the app. It's the only place that you get to go in and converse with other believers, those who watch these programs.
And boy, I'll tell you, the prayer request section of the app has become so active. This is one of the most active apps on my phone, my iPad, and we're really blessed to see that, because this is a place off of the main part of the internet where you can exchange thoughts, ideas, and prayer requests with one another without having it out there in the wider, internet, which may trigger an algorithm to flag you for something. But
it could. By the way, since we are very close to finishing the barn, we hope that you will mail your prayer requests to us, because we have a prayer board that we're going to be filling with all of your prayer requests. We will pray for them daily.
Yes.
So send it to Gilbert House, P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633.
Yeah, and that'll be going up as soon as we get everything done inside the barn. And as you're watching this, yes, we are getting closer to having it done. As we're recording this, the contractors are literally working out there right now. When I say contractors, it's Dave and Barb, Christ-powered construction out of Aurora, Missouri, doing the work out there right now. And we pray for them, because it's like 100 degrees with a heat index of 113 here in the Ozarks as we're recording this today in early August. So, we just pray that they are protected from the heat as they do the work out there. But and thank you for making that project possible.
Thank you very much. Well, last week we promised to begin with Dumuzi.
Yeah,
Which seems like an odd thing for Revelation 17.
It does, because he's not mentioned in the book of Revelation, but we're giving you sort of the backstory of the entity that we believe is the woman in scarlet, the whore of Babylon, whatever you want to call her, the woman who's featured, the great prostitute in Revelation chapter 17. Unlike other Bible teachers, prophecy scholars, we are looking at Revelation with the divine counsel in mind, because we think this is what the apostles and the prophets had in mind as they were looking at, say Ezekiel, Isaiah, Zechariah, all of the prophets who foresaw this great end of the age battle between the rebels, the fallen angels who had rejected God's authority, and God and his divine agent of justice, which is Jesus Christ, the Messiah. This great prostitute, we think, is the ancient entity known to the Sumerians as Inanna, to the Akkadians and Babylonians as Ishtar, to the Canaanites as Astarte, many names throughout history, Atargatis, the Queen of Heaven. Diana.
Artemis, possibly?
Artemis, probably. Yes, I would agree. And her consort, according to the ancient Sumerian myths, was a shepherd by the name of Dumuzi. He does appear in Ezekiel 8, verse 14, as Tammuz.
I'm there right now. I'm glad you brought that
You're
up.
right on
Ezekiel 8:13. He said also unto me, this is the Lord speaking to Ezekiel. Angels are showing him visions. Turn thee yet again. This is the KJV, by the way. And thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of Yahweh's house, which was toward the north. And behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. That's another name for Dumuzi.
Right. Interesting that it's the north gate. And I think we talked about this previously, but the direction north, which is Tsaphon in Hebrew, is a direction from which bad things always came upon Israel. When the Babylonians or the Assyrians or the Arameans invaded, it was always from the north, because to the east of ancient Judah and Israel was the Syrian desert, and you just don't cross that, not unless you're part of a camel caravan. But even then, they would go to the north to an ancient city called Mari, which is on the Euphrates River, near where Syria and Iraq have their border today, because there's a caravan trail then that would cross the desert through Palmyra down to Damascus. And then from Damascus, they would come down from the north, past Mount Hermon. But the fact that Mount Hermon is to the north, and also the mountain sacred to Baal, which was called Mount Tsaphon.
And that's the word used here.
Yes.
Tsaphon.
And scholars have agreed, and this is not just me saying this because, the word's the same, so it must mean the same thing. No, in the other ancient Semitic languages related to Hebrew, the word for the compass point north is Samal, which means left, because as you're facing the sunrise in the east, left, Samal, means north, right, Yamin, means south.
Yes.
Binu Yamina or Ben Yamin, Benjamin, means son of the right hand. Southerner.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is significant. In Hebrew, the fact that supernatural bad things came from the north. Mount Hermon, the Canaanite Mount Olympus, the mountain of Baal, which is Jebel al-Akra, near the ancient city of Antioch. It's in Turkey today, near the border with Syria, right on the Mediterranean coast. Those were north, and the fact that it was Baal's mountain was so significant that Tsaphon became the word for north in Hebrew.
Well, and the story of Tammuz was very familiar. The Jews had lived in Babylon for a while. They had grown up, many of them, with these pagan rites that included weeping for a rising and dying god called Tammuz or Dumuzi or Dumuzid. And this was Inanna's husband.
Yeah. Interestingly, in Sumerian, the name Dumuzi means the good son.
Oh, that is so
or
interesting.
The right son.
Now, here's the thing. He was a shepherd, and his parentage is obscure.
Right.
He may have been related to Shamash. He may not have been.
The sun god.
Exactly. He may have been human. But she married him. In fact, she was told to marry him. She didn't like him because he was a shepherd and he was dirty. So if you picture the idea of the bride of the shepherd, does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
This bride, Inanna, was a grain goddess, but she also is a war goddess, very different from the bride of Christ. Her betrothed, her shepherd, I make the case that he's the bad shepherd.
Right.
Whereas our Lord is the good shepherd.
Right. What's interesting about Dumuzi is that he was represented in Babylonian, Mesopotamian cosmology, their astrology or astronomy, as the constellation Orion.
Yes.
And we know that in at least some of the cultures around ancient Israel, that was very, very important. There was a dolmen field near Amman, Jordan, overlooking the Zarqa River, which is one of the rivers. In fact, it was the river along which Jacob wrestled the angel of God.
Yes, very important very important river. And the
Yeah.
fact that it was by a river, again, the idea of a crossing, a portal.
Right. This dolmen field, an Italian archaeological team was looking at the archaeoastronomy of the orientation of the dolmens. This is basically the study of how megalithic structures or any structure in the ancient world was aligned with what's in the sky. Is it the rising sun and the solstice or whatever? And they found that these dolmens in this one particular field were not really aligned with anything that they could ascertain. It wasn't the solstice, it wasn't the sun, it wasn't the moon, it wasn't Sirius or anything, until they noticed that the majority of them were oriented to about 150 degrees on the compass. That is 155 degrees, something like that, basically south-southeast. And they realized that this was the day in the winter, and the winter solstice, which was like the first day when the constellation Orion appears to be standing up, that the doors of these dolmens were aligned to that, or the majority of them anyway. So it seems to suggest that this culture that produced these dolmens probably 5,000 years ago were venerating the shepherd god, which would make sense because the way you earned a living in ancient Jordan back in the day was by tending your flocks and herds, sheep and goats mainly.
In the Old Testament, we have an example of a good shepherd, and that's David. He's not perfect. He's a pretty bad father, but he wasn't a wuss.
No.
He was a warrior. So the idea of a shepherd also being a warrior and protecting the sheep. David, he killed a number of predators that went after his sheep. So he was a tough dude. Dumuzi, probably the same. Again, Inanna didn't like him. So I think Dumuzi, the bad shepherd, he's really bad when you hear the story. I think we talked about it last week. Inanna going into the underworld to supposedly weep and mourn with her sister Ereshkigal because she's mourning the loss of her husband, the bull of heaven, that Inanna had a hand in.
Yeah, causing his death, right.
Yeah.
But this contrast, though, between Dumuzi and David is really significant because Dumuzi, as that shepherd, scholars look at him, and he's mentioned in the Sumerian king list, along with names like Gilgamesh and Enmerkar, who we believe was the biblical Nimrod.
Yes.
Dumuzi very likely was a human who became added to the pantheon in ancient Mesopotamia as a demigod. In fact, there's a lot more evidence for the worship of Dumuzi than there is for Nimrod. I can't find, after years and years of trying to study Mesopotamian religion, can't find a single example of Nimrod being venerated or worshipped. But Dumuzi, yes, very much
so. And I think we also mentioned last week that, again, she went down to see Ereshkigal. She came back up to find someone to take her place once she got out on dawn of the third day. He was sitting on her throne, wearing all her finery. Our shepherd would never do that. He was a bad shepherd, Dumuzi, bad shepherd. So he had to go into the underworld for 6 months of the year. His own sister volunteered to go in for 6 months of the year. And so you have this idea of a god who sleeps during the winter and then rises during the summer.
Right.
But you mentioned Orion. That is also called the giant.
Yes.
So is it possible that Dumuzi was a hybrid?
It is possible. It is possible. He may be a memory of a pre-flood entity. That name may be conflated with a later king in the post-flood era. But
let me say, if this was a pre-flood hybrid, that demon would still exist.
That's true. That is very true.
And therefore could possess a king. Or a queen.
Yeah, well, true. And very interesting, too, you mentioned again the dying and rising aspect of this. Skeptics will use that to claim that Jesus is just a copy of Adonis, who's another example of this. In fact, there's some scholars who think that Adonis, the Greek Adonis, and that word just means Lord, may be based on Dumuzi, and that Jesus is just a copy of that. Well, that's just not true. But that is one of the straws at which atheists and skeptics will clutch to try to deny the divinity of Jesus Christ.
Very much so. Well, Inanna and Dumuzi did indeed become married. And as I say, when she arose again, she decided that he had to go. So she got rid of him. Well, when you and I, this is really interesting, and we'll tease this and finish it after the break, but when you and I were at Petra, one of the things we researched was the idea that there may have been a cult that venerated a stone there that may have represented Dushara, the Lord of the Mountains, the
Yes.
Lord of the Shara Mountains.
Right, Seir, right.
This may have been Dumuzi.
Oh, yes. We'll talk about that. I also want to get into the third day concept and why that's so significant.
So much.
Straight ahead. Everyone learns differently, and that's why we write fiction.
It is. I find that some people love to read nonfiction, but there's something about fiction that psychologists say breaks that fourth wall. You no longer doubt what you're reading. You get so engrossed in the story that you learn. You can learn propaganda or you can learn God's truth.
Absolutely. So, yes, we write nonfiction books, but we are also using the gift of storytelling to try to teach spiritual warfare and spiritual truths. And during the months of August and September, we're offering all 10 of our novels at 20% off.
All 10 at 20% off? That's crazy.
That's
That
right.
is really, really a good deal. And now's the time if you want to buy gifts for birthdays or Christmas or whatever gift-giving season it is. It could even be Mother's Day next year. This is the time to save 20% on all of our fiction. And Derek's fiction is really, really good if you've never read it.
And Sharon's Red Wing Saga, 8 novels so far. She's hard at work on number 9.
9.
If you want to get engrossed in characters who are really grappling with the supernatural and trying to make sense of that world while teaching the divine counsel concepts that we try to communicate here, get involved in the Red Wing Saga. Again, all 8 of those novels, plus my 2 novels, The God Conspiracy and Iron Dragons, 20% off now only at our online store. That's gilberthouse.org/store. Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and as we mentioned at the very top of this program, our contractor, Dave and Barb, wonderful couple, they are here working on the electrics in the barn. And we can do that because you have helped build Barn Better.
Absolutely. We're turning that into usable studio and office space as we've essentially converted every spare bedroom in our home. This is the sitting room off of our master bedroom, but the others are 2 podcast studios and a shipping office.
This is going to become my study.
So Sharon's looking forward to getting her writing room back, and you have made that possible. We will keep you posted. We'll show you some video right here of the floor that's gone in, and as we have opportunities in the weeks ahead to take more pictures of the project in progress, we'll share those with you as well. And again, we can't tell you how much we appreciate your help and your support in making this a reality. That building, we didn't go looking for a home with a building when we moved to the Ozarks 8 years ago.
No.
The Lord provided, and now it's become clear that this is where we are supposed to take our efforts as we want to produce more video content to share the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. It seems that that is a way to preach outside the choir. Occasionally, our little video efforts on the virtual Mars Hill, YouTube.
You said the word.
I know. It'll trigger the algorithm.
We'll have the duck come down from the ceiling. If you're my age, you know what I'm talking about.
I can do the Groucho eyebrows.
Oh, you can.
Anyway, that sometimes they will go viral and it will reach outside the group, and that's our hope.
That is.
Now, a lot of what we do is intended to encourage you as a believer to look. The Bible is not based on blind faith. We are not encouraged to just follow Christ blindly. Faith, yes. I mean, it's not, we don't have like DNA evidence or smoking guns or anything, but the rocks are crying out. God bless the archaeologists, the linguists, the epigraphers who are translating these ancient texts. The evidence is there. And we, of course, got the eyewitness testimony of the apostles who saw the risen Jesus Christ. We can share that information, and we want to have a space to do it. And again, you are making that possible.
So, yes, thank you very much. And by the way, we mentioned before the break that we go to Petra and look for confirmation or learn more about the possible worship of Dumuzi. Well, you can go there too.
Yes.
Go with us in March to Israel, late March if you just go to gilbertsinisrael.com, gilbertsinisrael.com, all the information's there.
Yes.
And you can go to Jordan with us too if you take the extension.
Oh, please do, because while you're over there going to Jordan, much biblical history took place east of the Jordan River, as we discussed before the break even. That's where Jacob wrestled the angel, and of course the plains of Moab where the Israelites camped before crossing to Jericho. We'll look down on that location from Mount Nebo. We'll show you the site of Sodom from there, ancient Sodom, and much more. Petra, of course, is just amazing.
It is so neat.
It's more
So
spiritually significant than we realize.
That is so true. And Tim Alberino, along with his wonderful, beautiful wife, Jasmine, will be with us. So plan to join us next year.
Amen.
Dumuzi in Petra.
Dushara, the lord of the Shara mountains, or Seir, which is often used as a synonym for Edom in the Bible.
Let me just preface this by saying that you and I have a theory that Mount Sinai is in those mountains.
Right, yeah. There's a site that has become very popular with good friends of ours, in fact, and some very well-respected researchers like Joel Richardson.
There are a number of
Penny
other possible
Caldwell,
mountains.
others, and there are others that are located elsewhere in the northern Negev. The Associates for
They may
Biblical
be
Research.
right.
And they may be right. I think the mountain in Saudi Arabia that's pointed to, Jebel al-Laws, is too far south based on the book of Deuteronomy, 11 days travel to Kadesh Barnea.
Right.
When you're walking with elderly people in flocks and herds, you don't make very much mileage in a day, maybe 4, 5, 6 miles at most.
And when you figure they couldn't go until the pillar of
fire moved, yeah.
the pillar of cloud.
Yes.
They probably walked during that. Well, they may have walked at night. Who knows?
Yeah.
Cooler.
In the desert, it's certainly cooler, yeah. And the pillar of fire would certainly have lit the way.
It would
But
have.
regardless, it's likely that Mount Sinai is further north than many people think, and that it certainly would make sense if that area around Petra had been spiritually important to Moses.
Right.
God bringing Moses and the Israelites there, that later, because we also believe Petra is where the original Kaaba was located,
Which gets into Dumuzi.
right, which the enemy then would try to appropriate, just as the fallen realm is trying to take the Temple Mount, Zion, for its own.
We also believe, as many others do, that when all these things happen in Jerusalem and the Lord said, don't stop to take anything, just run. This is a future event, that it may occur halfway during the tribulation period, but whenever it occurs, it's possible that the Lord will miraculously conceal them in Petra. Again, the idea of an exodus taking them to Petra. So we think that there are a number of reasons why Petra is a good location, good idea for the location of Mount Sinai, the mountain of Sin,
Yes.
the moon god.
Right.
Mountain.
Which, again, would suggest the connection to Islam in the 7th century A.D. When Muhammad was led there. There is a cave in the small Sikh that appears to be where Muhammad may have received his revelation, and there is a small shrine there to, with a representation of the crescent moon above it. But this Lord of Seir, the mountains there would have been occupied prior to the Nabateans arriving there in the 3rd century BC, the Nabatean Arabs, who set up a very wealthy kingdom by controlling the spice routes from South Arabia to the port at Gaza to ship then to the rest of the Mediterranean, the Greeks and the Romans.
And they had turned it into an oasis.
Right. Because as you were coming up the route along the west side of the Arabian Peninsula, you would need a place there to stop, refresh, recharge, and of course pay taxes. And of course, it also would have controlled the access from the King's Highway along the east side of the Dead Sea, running from Egypt to the rest of Mesopotamia, Damascus and Mesopotamia. So it was a good place to have a kingdom, especially if you could, say, okay, traveler, caravan, stop and pay the toll. The god of the Seir Mountains, Dushara, lord of the Shara Mountains, may well have been an entity worshipped previously. And I think that veneration of Dumuzi, as evidenced by that dolmen field, which is much further north, east of the Sea of Galilee, but still on the east side of the Jordan River, where you've got those hills, those mountains, where the previous settlers, the residents along that region, probably, the early Edomites, Moabites, Ammonites, were shepherds and would have found Dumuzi to be a good choice for a patron deity.
Well, I think so too. They could have related to him, and he would have guarded their sheep. He could have
in their minds, not
exactly.
for real, but in their minds, yes.
But also the idea that he would have married a grain goddess. This is a fulfillment of ritualistic fertility. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that this entity actually was created pre-flood. A memory of him survived the flood. That entity, because it is a spirit freed by the death of the body, might enter into a king when invoked, and therefore provide. Frankly, I think Inanna is post-flood, so this would be possibly a watcher class angel that pretends to be this deity, this woman, this goddess, that she is worshipped along with this ancient pre-flood deity. And husband and wife ensure that you have herds and grain, that your crops grow.
And the spring rituals would have involved some sort of fertility rite, which again is not anything that God ever intended.
And when he arose, exactly.
Right. So this this practice of the spring fertility rite, the sacred marriage, where similar probably to what the young Israelite prince and Midianite woman did in front of Moses and all Israel on the plains of Moab.
I was just about to suggest that exactly, because that is the ancient worship that existed there in this region where Sin was worshipped. Sin was Inanna's daddy.
Yeah, the moon god.
The ancient ideas.
Known to the Amorites as Yarik, which is where we get the name of the city Jericho, which was just across the river from where they were camped. But also, as we know from Psalm 106, verse 28, that it was the sacrifices being offered to the dead, to the Rephaim, that prompted God to, in his anger, send a plague that killed some 24,000 Israelites before Phinehas took a spear and, put an end to the young Israelite prince and Midianite princess and whatever it was that they were doing, probably a fertility ritual.
Exactly. Well, let's go back to Ezekiel 8, where they are weeping for Tammuz in 8:14. That is essentially a ritual for the dead.
Right. Yes. He's descended to the netherworld at the end of the growing season. Everything is turning brown, but when the spring comes, they rejoice. They have the fertility rites, and the world is green again. Again, this is a demonic, literally doctrines of demons, drawing people away from the worship of the one true God, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we're running out of time, but we'll talk more about the third day and the prohibitions in Scripture against eating sacrifices on the third day, how that was twisted by the fallen realm with Inanna's descent into the netherworld coming out on the third day. And also, we'll need to talk about Dumuzi as a dragon next week as well, because this relates to the type of entities that we are dealing with in the spirit realm, the Nakash, the serpentine, divine entities. Boy, a lot of things going on here all at once, and it relates to where we're going in the end times. And we'll talk about that next week on Unraveling Revelation.
Unraveling Revelation is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. Follow us online at unravelingrevelation.tv and gilberthouse.org. We'd love to hear from you. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633.